This week, we talk about new details with the Switch 2, Starfield getting a bunch of big updates, the controversy surrounding Escape from Tarkov's new edition, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 30. I am your host, the man whose remake for Nintendo Switch was downgraded from 60 frames per second to 30, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man whose PvE mode is locked behind a $250 paywall, Justin, better known as I Am Zaragon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
Not too bad. I honestly realized today that it's already May, and it's like, where's the time gone? It seems like it was just beginning of April, and we're already into May, so that's something there. And I don't know how much you know about my sort of region, but or at least in my state of Maryland, the weather has a lot of mood swings, where once the seasons start to change and you move into different periods of what it's supposed to be temperature-wise, it really just swings back and forth between extremely warm to the point of being hot to dropping down to being cool, and it does that within the span of a few days. So that's going on right now. But I've been getting back a little bit into watching Dragon Ball Z just because I had seen someone do a bit of a fan edit where they took the new version of Dragon Ball Z Kai, but they took the original American music soundtrack and just like spliced it over. So you have the dub for the new dub for Kai, but you have the original American soundtrack. And honestly, it's something that I never knew that I wanted. So, I mean, obviously, we don't have the full series for doing that, but it was interesting enough to make me want to go back and watch Dragon Ball. So I'm doing that. But other than that, my week's been pretty good.
That's cool. So when you say the original American soundtrack, are you talking about like the rock heavy one that they did after they switched over to Funimation, or are you talking about the original?
Like the Bruce Falconer score? Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with that, and then, you know, I didn't hear like the original like Japanese style soundtrack. You know, actually, I can't remember if the Blu-ray version of Dragon Ball Z, that's, you know, not the condensed version of Kai, if that has the original like Japanese soundtrack or if that maintains the American one, but I don't know.
Kai does have the original
right.
Japanese soundtrack.
Okay. Well, I didn't mean Kai. I meant the original non-Kai version. Oh. The one with all the filler.
Right.
Which is what I have.
I'm not sure about the Blu-ray. Like, the DVD, or at least the orange brick box sets, they did have both the Japanese and the American soundtrack. Yeah. I don't know if the Blu-ray version had it, though.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's been quite a few years since I watched through that, so... Funny enough, actually, even though I had watched the majority of Dragon Ball Z when it was airing on Toonami and everything, I never saw the majority of Season 7 or Season 8 or 9 until I got the Blu-rays. When I got the Blu-rays, and then I went through all of them, and then went through all of Super, or at least all of what was available of Super at that time. I had to watch like the last probably 10-15 episodes in Japanese. Just because they hadn't dubbed it yet, but of course I haven't seen any of the like Dragon Ball Super Brawly or Superhero. I can't remember if there's another movie on top of that too.
The Resurrection F, the Frieza one.
No, because Resurrection F was originally they had that as a Dragon Ball Z thing, and then they put the story into Super. So, anyway, yeah, but I want to get all of Super as well, though I probably will end up watching it in Japanese. I mean, it still bugs me that Goku's voiced by a woman. I mean, I understand it's the same person who voiced him as a kid, and so they just kept using her. But it's still just like, that's something that always bugged me about the original Japanese version. So I don't know, but of course I also can't stand some of the American voice actors behind the characters. But at the same time, it's like, they're still iconic though to me because I grew up with that. They're terrible people, but I don't know. Anyway, all that being said, as far as my week, it's been kind of an interesting one. Pretty busy overall. I kind of just barely got my recording done in time for my comparison, and it's basically like I had been playing through. So I think it was sometime on Saturday. I started. Actually, no, it was Friday because my wife was at like a women's conference thing at one of the local churches on Friday evening and Saturday morning, and so I decided, okay, well, I would use the opportunity to get my recording done for Tales of Kenzera, and I got like right near the end in that elevator fight I had mentioned before, where I had like a bunch of trouble with it. Of course, I had a bunch of trouble with it. I was dying constantly. I maintain that is probably one of the hardest fights in the whole game because it's a narrow space. It's really easy to get stuck between two guys, and so like you'll have one hit you, you'll get knocked over, and then as you're trying to get up, the other hits you, and then you keep getting knocked over, and it's just huge pain in the butt. And so like I tried it a bunch of times, and then I finally just gave up. I just stopped. I mean, like I kept the recording. When I did the ultimate compilation of the two, I just I just sped up that part, and then when I when I finished doing the recording, which was the rest of that fight through the first mini boss of the game. When I did that, it's like that grand total last little bit was 7 minutes long. And so it's like I was only missing that last 7 minutes for my initial recording because of the fact that I was stuck on that stupid fight that I just couldn't get past. But anyway, so like I ended up getting that done much later than I wanted to, and because Sunday we had our family group, I didn't have as much time to edit in the afternoon. And there was not just because of what I wanted to do with the video itself, but because of the amount of stuff I had to do with the audio. And I ended up missing some stuff. I'm going to have to go back and try to go over the audio again and make sure I really clean it up. I mean, it's mostly good. It's just there's like kid noises here and there that I missed. And anyway, I ended up delaying the release of it until Tuesday morning. And so I was able to get that out. I'm trying to decide what I want to do with those videos going forward, because on the one hand, I think it's nice having that much gameplay so people can really get a good taste of what you can expect for the most part and how the game plays. But at the same time, I also know people don't watch that full amount for the most part. I mean, like, the average watch time is like a minute, 2 minutes, and it also takes me a lot longer to edit that. So I'm trying to decide if I want to keep doing that format where I'm doing the full length of stuff, or record all of it and then chop it into sections and just like label each section and say, okay, this is exploration, this is gameplay, this is boss fight, this is cutscenes, that sort of thing. But anyway, so that one was interesting, an interesting comparison, because what ended up becoming very apparent to me is that the Switch version, the colors pop a lot more than they do on the Steam Deck, and at least that is with the anti-glare OLED. I'm sure with the regular OLED, it probably wouldn't be as drastic of a difference, but there is that difference. However, the Steam Deck version has a lot more detail, even on low settings. I mean, like there was one point where you go to a shrine, which is where you get your power up, your ability that you can use to get to new areas and all that. And the shrine on the Switch version, it was like very dark. There was like almost no lighting whatsoever. But then the Steam Deck, like the statue thing was like all well lit up and all that. It was just really interesting looking at those differences. So like the colors are super vibrant on the Switch compared to the Steam Deck, at least in the video. But the Steam Deck is definitely more detailed. And I did realize when I had them playing side by side, the Switch version definitely does not maintain 60 frames per second. I don't know what it gets down to exactly. My guess is they probably have an unlocked frame rate, and so then it's just running at whatever it runs at. Sometimes it's up in the 60, and sometimes it's down, in the 40s, some maybe even the 30s. I'm not entirely sure. I just know that like I was seeing some, especially with combat, that there would be times where it was, I mean, like I could tell, okay, Steam Deck, of course, besides the fact that I have a frame rate counter saying that it's 60 frames, it also just looks way smoother than the Switch version at the same time. So that was interesting. Something else with that is that I ended up finding that when I got to one of the sections near the end of Act 3, which is in like a volcano area, and that's not really a spoiler or anything, just typical kind of thing you'd expect in this kind of game. The frame rate tanked down to like 24 frames per second. And I don't know if this was like I had the Steam Deck on for a while and so then it was going down, or if it was because of just the area in general that there was a lot of effects going on. I don't know. But I ended up, at least up until I got to the boss fight of Act 3, I dropped it down to the lowest settings. It still looked pretty good, just not as good, and was able to pretty much maintain 60 for the most part. But, or I'm sorry, let me back up. When I dropped it down to the lowest settings, it stayed at 60. But then when I went back into the boss fight, I had died, maybe once or twice initially. I ended up bumping up the settings to low settings, so it looked a little bit better. Still was able to maintain 60, so it wasn't, or pretty well maintained. Like maybe be dropped down to 58 occasionally. But yeah. So anyway, it's interesting just the differences in how it performs between the two. I still think both versions are worthwhile. Someone with only a Switch, I would definitely recommend the Switch version. If they have a Steam Deck, then I would definitely recommend the Steam version. And if they don't care about portable play, then I'd say PC or any console would be good. Just get it where you prefer playing it. But anyway, last thing I just want to say before we start talking about games we've been playing this week is that my daughter woke up throwing up a bunch this morning, which was just delightful. And we don't know if it's like an actual stomach bug or what. My wife initially thought that maybe it was because of what we had for dinner last night, because it was a little bit spicy, and this is the second time she's thrown up after having something spicy. But then it just kept going off and on throughout, for several hours, and so realized that probably wasn't the problem, and she's eaten that stuff before and never had problems, so I don't know. But anyway, she seems to be all right now. She went to bed, and she hadn't thrown up probably since early afternoon or something. So anyway,
I'll pray just to make sure that later, just to make sure that everything's fine with her.
Yeah, I'm sure she's perfectly fine. Like she'll have, she'll just occasionally have situations where she'll just throw up like 2 or 3 times in the day, and then she'll be fine the rest of the day, and it doesn't come back. It doesn't seem to be like a 24-hour bug, but we don't know what it is. We're just hoping nobody else gets it, because that would not be right.
That's definitely true.
Kids really didn't do any school today because of my daughter being sick. So
Hmm.
anyway, yeah.
Question I want to ask you. So, uh, about your consideration about how you want to edit your videos moving forward, do you think it would be more work chopping them up into different sections and having to label them, or do you think it would be less work compared with what you're doing now?
I think it depends on the game. With Tales of Kenzera, because it was over an hour of footage, it would probably be less work technically, because I'd be able to cut out a lot of footage, so I wouldn't have to review the audio and everything else, and wouldn't have to worry about pausing as much, like pausing the footage when it gets to a certain point so that I can have them basically going to the same spot at the same time. But like I honestly don't know. That game, it would have been technically less work, but it was like, okay, well, I hadn't already planned on doing that, and I was already at the point where I had done enough of the work with the pausing and stuff to where I didn't really want to go back and try to fix it. So I just decided to keep the whole thing. I was gonna put up a poll on my channel, but I haven't gotten around to it. I just haven't really had time. So. But anyway, what have you been playing this past week?
Well, I must say, this past week, I feel like I've been a bit of a Sony fanboy. I've been playing. I played several different PlayStation games, and
What?
I don't know. I feel like I should be wearing like a blue beanie hat or something to represent. But I played Spider-Man, some more Spider-Man 2018. Primarily, I was going through different side missions, also exploring around, taking care of some other stuff like the different bases, catching pigeons now. I've been doing that, helping out there. Been going around trying to find all the Black Cat plushies as well, and actually I do have a question about this one thing I'm about to go into. So I did a side mission for Screwball, and this seems to be like an initial one. Doesn't seem like to be anything related to what's going to happen later on, and I realized I'm hoping that they just intentionally made her this way, but I was just going through the mission thinking she's very annoying.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh wait, the Screwball challenges, this is the character. I didn't even know who Screwball was or what it was, and I was like, oh wait, it's this person. How many challenges are there, by the way? Because I see there are quite a few, supposedly based on the achievements.
I don't remember exactly, but they're all part of the DLC. I think they are. I can't remember if they're in all three parts of the DLC, or if they're just in one, or if they're just in two. I think that they're in at least two, but I don't remember.
Okay.
But
yeah.
There's definitely
I
a variety
curious.
of challenges there, so they're pretty interesting. And she's obviously a psycho, but
yeah. Yeah, I'm just like listening to her, and I'm thinking to myself, what? You're really doing all this stuff, and then you're saying that you're not to blame for what's going on here. It's like, okay.
Right. Yeah, she makes me think of more like the kind of villain you'd get from the Arkhamverse than something from Spider-Man, but it's like, yeah, she's insane.
Yeah. I feel like I should get back to the story eventually, because the last thing I did was Peter was evicted after not being able to pay his bills, and because Osborn cut the funding. So I'm trying to remember where I'm supposed to be going next for that. But I've just been. I've been enjoying doing the side stuff so far, that I haven't necessarily felt compelled to get back into the story, but I feel like when I start playing next, I will get back into the story and progress things along there. But I'm still enjoying the game. It's still a blast, and I'm having fun with that. But next PlayStation game I've been playing, and I don't actually have footage for this, and I'll actually explain why in a second, is Helldivers 2. A friend of mine, for my friend group, he said, we can play this next time we meet up and stuff. And he gifted us all a copy of the
Nice.
game. And I was initially skeptical because I was interested in Helldivers 2, but I heard a couple things about the DRM, particularly the fact that it had been in the past hard to actually remove it, even after you uninstall the game that it's attached to. And so initially I was thinking to myself, I don't know what I'm gonna do here. I don't know if I want to set up my own little VM just so like I don't have to worry about that. But then I saw someone say in some forum that if you're playing it on Linux, it shouldn't be a problem because it's not like it's trying to, access certain privileged files, because it can't, because it's not like it's running through Wine or Proton or whatever compatibility layer. So I was like, all right, in that case, I feel comfortable just running it straight on my bare metal machine. So played it so far, and it's complicated to get some of the, it takes a while to understand some of the mechanics of the game, because for one thing, you're constantly going to have to call in certain stratagems to assist you, whether it's getting more ammo, getting different weapons, whether it's just calling down artillery.
Yeah. So
that is something I'm still trying to figure out and work with. It runs pretty well for me. I had to adjust some stuff, but I'm able to get it running at 60 FPS with a mixture of sort of medium-ish, one or two things low here and there. The problem I was having, though, was the fact that when I was trying to run it through externally to my capture card, it was messing up the frame rate entirely, and it was even freezing on my computer, but then on the other on my laptop where I was actually recording the footage, it would also freeze there occasionally and it go back and forth. So I thought, this is not working for me. So because of that, I couldn't really capture anything. But when I finally unplugged the capture card, then it was running perfectly. So it does seem to be pretty good so far. I kind of suck at it, but it definitely was enjoyable to play with friends. Another game that I played that I tried out was a game called Pools. This is something that I had just seen, which the concept just intrigued me enough. It's more or less just a walking simulator, to be blunt about it, but you're pretty much exploring an empty labyrinth with different pools of water, and you're pretty much trying to find a way out of there. The thing about it is that nothing has come out to get you, but because of the way it's designed, especially when you go through tight spaces, especially when you go through dark corridors, it does feel like something is there. And it's really meant, especially because the game works best if you're playing it with headphones on, especially because sound is a big component to that, and so you hear stuff. And because of the way it sounds, especially when you're walking through like the water, walking through different halls, it does sound like something could be there. And actually, there is something a couple times where there was a ladder I saw, and then something pulled the ladder through a grate. Didn't see what it was, but something pulled it up there. And then I walked around, I saw a manhole, and then I saw some hands like just holding onto it, and then the hands went inside. And so
did they ask for paper?
Like the Steam page says that nothing is out to get you, but I feel like the devs still put something in there just to keep you unsettled, even if nothing really is there. Because I remember something, I actually thought there was something there, because I was in the water and I saw something moving along right around a corner, and I went to peek just to see what it was, and that was just a giant inflatable duck that was just bobbing up and down. So the game definitely has a creepy edge. It's not necessarily horror, but it's just something that unsettles you.
Yeah.
And I mean, the devs said that they weren't certain if they were going to get to work on the Steam Deck. I feel like maybe it could run. Initially, I tried out the demo just to see, in general, if it would run on Linux in general. But I started it and I had no problems. Was able to get it to run without even changing any of my Proton settings. You might have to change it to low to get it to run on Steam, just because on the Steam Deck, just because on my PC at least, I have it running at mostly medium, maybe high on two things. It's pretty much 60 when you're not in the water, but once you get into the water, then it drops to like maybe around 45-ish. So if you drop to low, maybe it'll work on the Steam Deck. And then one last thing, I also didn't include gameplay just because it's just a pretty much footnote. I'm playing some more of Halls of Torment, just pretty much just going to get a lot of achievements, and eventually I'll get back and try to finish the last level for that. But yep.
Very cool. Yeah, the pools game is definitely, it's intriguing to me. I mean, it's definitely unsettling, you know, but it's also intriguing. Curious about it. I would probably check it out if it was like really cheap or something. I might grab it and check it out just when I need something a little different. But yeah, I played quite a few different games this week. Most of them not very much, but one of the first things that I ended up getting, because I bought several games from Instant Gaming again, and as well as a couple of them that were just on sale on Steam for my wish list. But one of the games I got was Shenmue 1 and 2. And so I played a bit of Shenmue 1, which I've never played before. I've never played any of the Shenmue games. But Gabe Patillo, who, you know, the guy I have mentioned a few times now, who passed away last month, this was one of his favorite games of all time. Like, he always just talked about how much he loved this game. And it's one of those games that, because I didn't have a Dreamcast at the time that it was, you know, a new platform as much as I wanted one, it's a game just I never played. And so and it was $6 for Shenmue 1 and 2, so it was like, hey, that's a good price. And Shenmue 3 was like $2.45 on Instant Gaming. So it was, you know, good prices. I mean, I spent, you know, like $8.50 for 3 games, for all 3 of these games, and something I've been interested in checking out for a long time, just never did. But the only thing that's bad about it is that it's locked 30 frames per second. You can't get it above that. I looked all over the internet to see if there was anything that would make it possible, but nope. It's locked 30. I mean, it doesn't drop. No drops whatsoever, which is good considering the fact that it's just an up-res version of a Dreamcast game, which could, you know, any of those games could easily run on a potato. But that being said, as far as the game itself goes, it has me intrigued. Now, the voice acting is awful, which is, you know, that's pretty much, it's been a meme for a long time at how bad the voice acting is, and just, you know, various other things about the game. But this, just something about it has me intrigued enough to where I want to keep playing. I only really stopped because I kind of hit a little bit of a wall early on, and it wasn't like anything major. It's basically just that there was, in order to progress one of the side quests I took on, I needed to have it daytime, because the person that I needed to talk to was gone after a certain hour of the day from the spot where I was going to go talk to her. And so I just kind of got to a point, it's like, okay, since the game actually progresses, you know, through the hours, I didn't get past that, and I, you know, did some of the other stuff related to the main story for a bit. But anyway, I'm definitely going to keep checking it out off and on, just because this is a game I've wanted to check out, and it's also just kind of, you know, tribute to Gabe and all that. But yeah, I didn't play a lot of it this week, mostly since I had other stuff to do. But of course, I did get some time with both of my boys, playing some Lego Harry Potter with my oldest son, and, you know, getting through the next level in the game, which was, I believe we went to the woods or something, or maybe that was last week. That might have been last week. But we did whatever the next level was of the game, made some more progress on that, and then with my other son, we did Lego Pirates of the Caribbean, and we did the portion where Jack and Elizabeth are stuck on a deserted island after getting kicked off the ship. So we did that level. I did play a little bit of Devil May Cry 3. I don't have any new footage because I forgot to record some this week and I didn't play very much. So all you see here is just the footage I had recorded previously. But then the games that I played probably the most this week, first of all, was Horizon Forbidden West, which I played a fairly decent amount. I ended up stopping the other night though because I was just doing like a side thing where I was supposed to find a specific robot that I needed to get a part from in order to upgrade one of my weapons. And the map, the quest was marked, the location for the quest was marked on my map in a certain spot. But I just could not get that robot to show up there at all. And so I got just annoyed after a while of trying to find it and not seeing it. And so I stopped playing for a bit. But I did play a bunch of Tales of Kenzera Zao, and I finished it. I got through the rest of the game. I got all the achievements. I will admit that for the combat challenges, because I've never been that great at combat and I was just getting annoyed after multiple attempts and failures, I ended up lowering the difficulty to easy just for those fights. Those were challenges that you needed to complete in order to get some of the remaining upgrades. And it's like, okay, I got through the first stage of each of like a couple of them, and then I was just getting annoyed going through multiple tests, because basically it's just like you have 3 challenges per location, and there's like 3 or 4 locations total, and each challenge has a bunch of waves of enemies. So it just got very annoying to get like through most of the waves and then just having one wave kill me, and then I have to start over from the beginning of that challenge, and it got so annoying that I just finally decided to lower the difficulty to finish those out. But as an overall game, I thought it was a solid Metroidvania. Not like the best one I played by any stretch, but it was still a very, very good game. It reminded me a lot of Ori and the Blind Forest in terms of the gameplay and just the overall thing, although it had actual boss fights, which Blind Forest did not. I mean, Blind Forest just had escape sections. I'm pretty sure Will of the Wisps gave you actual boss fights, though. I haven't played it yet. But yeah, and even though there's the whole controversy about the Sweet Baby involvement, honestly, like, there was maybe one thing that could be looked at as this is Sweet Baby's involvement talking, but although it was initially the way it was addressed, this is an extremely minor spoiler, and most people probably aren't entirely playing this game for the story anyway, but basically he's asked about his mother, because the concept of this game, of course, is that the guy lost his father, and he's trying to make a bargain with the god of death to do something for him in order to bring his father back. And the god of death basically agrees to it, or at least seemingly agrees to it. It's not really like entirely clear initially what's going on with all that, but once again, this is not really all that spoilery. But at one point, the god of death asks him about his mother, because he he's wondering what's up with his mother. And initially, the main character Zhao says that his mother abandoned him when he was young. And then when we get a little bit further in, he kind of expands on that a bit and says that the reason why she left him and his father was because she didn't really want to be just a mother and a wife. She wanted to go out back into the wilds where, she had already been hunting and whatever else. Basically, it comes down to she wanted to focus on her career. So she was a bad mother, is really what it is. Bad mother, bad wife. And I see that as, okay, you could definitely interpret that as a sweet baby involvement kind of thing. He kind of, like, at one point, initially when he talks about what her reason was, he says, okay, well, I don't entirely fault her for that, but the way it kind of comes across, especially as you go further on, is that it's not necessarily that he doesn't fault her, it's more that he just has come to accept the reality of what she was doing, why she left, and acknowledges that not only, that, he kind of just had to learn to live with it, and he still had his father who was there completely present, who's actually a good dad, but that his father was broken up still about his wife leaving. So I think that the funny thing is that if Sweet Baby was involved, and if they were trying to basically promote this idea of, empowerment or whatever, with her leaving instead of being tied down to being a mother and a wife, they kind of failed, because they basically she still seemed like she was a really bad mother. Just plain and simple. She was a bad mother, a bad wife. And if that's what they were if they were trying to make it seem like it was a positive thing, an empowerment thing, they just completely failed on that front. So, all that being said, that was the only thing in the entire game that could be interpreted in that way. But it was not bad enough to where it really detracted from the quality of the game itself. Like, I really thoroughly enjoyed this game. I'm glad that I played it. I'm glad that I didn't just believe all of the rage bait about, because this is Sweet Baby's involvement, you have to boycott this game. It's just a DEI inspired game because the protagonist is black, and so obviously they're doing it just for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and like all this other nonsense. Like, I'm not about Sweet Baby at all. I don't like what they do. I don't like some of these other initiatives that have infiltrated our society, but the reality is that this game has nothing to do with that. Regardless of what they try to paint it to be. It's like, you have this game created by a man who lost his father, who wanted to write a story about dealing with loss, dealing with the loss of a father, dealing with just loss in general, and processing those emotions and learning how to accept the realities of how life changes after you lose someone you love. And I will say, it's been almost 6 years since my dad died, and it's been almost 3 years since my mom died, and it didn't hit me as hard because of the fact that I've gotten to that point where, like, it's just a reality. This is what happened in my life, and not so much something where I feel like I'm not as broken up about it like I used to be. Now, that being said, obviously I still miss my parents. I wish they were still here, but I've also just accepted the reality of this is what reality is now. And, of course, it helps, obviously, that I have comfort knowing my parents are in heaven. all of that. But anyway, I've said a whole lot about that game. Let me just mention the last few games that I played real quick here. All of them were fairly short. But in the midst of just being kind of like, after I finished Tales of Kenzera, I initially tried jumping into the messenger for like maybe 5 minutes, and I got frustrated very quickly, mostly because my muscle memory was off, because I remembered I was trying to play it like I played Tales of Kenzera, and they don't control exactly the same. Oh, I do want to mention just one very quick note. I briefly, I played a bit of Tales of Kenzera on my desktop as well, and my desktop I was easily getting 120, 150 frames per second, no problem. Although it appears when I put the video footage into the into Streamlabs to have it playing, it must have still been at 800p instead of 1080p. So I'm not sure if it would run. My guess is it would probably be more like just a 120 across the board if I had it actually at 1080p. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, the messenger was getting me a little bit frustrated from that standpoint, and so I was kind of like, okay, what do I want to play? I'm not sure. I tried playing Horizon for a little bit, got frustrated at that, that issue. So then I ended up booting up Nier Automata on my desktop, and I will say that game runs like beautifully. I forgot to turn on the frame rate counter, but it's easily running at 120 frames per second without question. Max settings on absolutely everything. I will say, unfortunately, the textures don't match up as well to the higher resolution, which is rather unfortunate. I need to see if there's any like mods to improve them, because some of the environmental stuff could definitely be better for higher resolution display and everything. But anyway, a little bit that I played runs extremely smoothly, looks great overall. Just some of the textures I think could be better, and that's really just the game itself rather than my system, since I had it running at max on everything. But it's not really something that I'm like wanting to play so much. So what I did do is I went ahead and I decided first of all to finally play something that's been on my shelf for a while but I hadn't touched yet, mostly just because I wasn't really ready to dive in, and that is Octopath Traveler 2. And I have this on the Switch, and I've only played, I picked one of the characters and played through his first chapter, and just a tiny bit beyond that. I like what I played so far, of course. I can definitely already see some of the quality of life improvements they've made over the first game, which I came close to 100%ing. I never beat the final secret boss because he was very, very difficult. But the little bit that I played, I like. I don't know if it's going to be something I stick with or not. At least not right now, because I'm not sure if I want to jump into another lengthy RPG when I'm in the middle of other games. But at least the bit that I played, I definitely wanted to play more. And of course, like, the soundtrack of this game is phenomenal. The first game had one of my favorite soundtracks. One thing that I did realize about this is, and I mean, I guess I've known it for a while. So the first Octopath came out shortly before I found out my dad was dying. Came out, like maybe a month before, and that was when I was playing it most heavily. So the music, particularly like the main theme and just some of the songs from that first game, really get me like. It actually got me more emotional than Tales of Kenzera, even though Kenzera handles the topic more of losing your father, but just the music, because of what it was tied with, the event in my life. It definitely got me more, but this one, just like, apart from the main theme, all the music is new, completely new. So I was just enjoying, how great the music is, and Visuals are really cool. I'd be curious about how it looks on Steam Deck compared with Switch because of the art style. I know that it definitely would run at 60 frames on Steam Deck versus the 30 it does on a Switch. But either way, it's a cool game. And then this afternoon, I just decided for a bit, okay, I'm going to try jumping back into the Messenger because I really do want to see if I could get past that point where I got stuck. And I did get past that point. It took still several tries, but once I got past that, then I got to the boss for this particular area, and I fought him a bunch of times, and I've gotten close to beating him a few times, but I struggle because the thing is his movements are sometimes a little erratic, and so like the way he'll jump around, it's a little unpredictable at times, and those times when it's unpredictable are the times I end up getting hit. And then when I get hit, more often, I run out of health before I finish him, even when I get him down to low health. So anyway, I tried this a bunch of times. The footage I have here is just several of my many attempts, and I'll try again, and I'll get it eventually. I'm not going to turn down the difficulty on this one, even if I could, just because I don't really feel like it's necessary, since mostly it's just a matter of me being a little bit better, and instead of, it's not like in Tales of Kenzera where I was dealing with a bunch of different enemies. It's like, okay, I just have this one boss, and I've gotten past every other boss so far. I've gotten this guy low, I just haven't been able to beat him because I end up getting hit too many times. So, anyway. But yeah, that's basically all I've been playing this week. Like I said, a bunch of different stuff, mostly small amounts other than Tales of Kenzera and Horizon Forbidden West.
Okay. One question I have about Octopath 2. I know you said you haven't really gotten too much into the game, but I guess if you have gone far enough, do you feel like the characters, at least early on, their stories connect better than the first one?
I haven't gotten past more than one character, but
okay.
everything I've heard is that yes, all the stories connect, and it's
yeah.
not. I mean, because the first game, obviously they didn't connect in a clear way. There was actually a surprising way in which the stories all connected. It's just that it was basically like it's hidden in the area before the final boss, and it's all just text. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would actually, I don't know if anyone's ever done a breakdown of it, but it's actually really interesting lore, and the way that everything connects is super interesting, because this isn't going to spoil anything, really, but because I don't remember exactly all the connections, but basically when you go to the area for the secret hidden, obviously secret and hidden, the true final boss of the game, which is not treated as a final boss per se, because it's not like when you beat the boss you get like an extra ending, because you don't. Actually, you get nothing basically out of it except the satisfaction of beating the hardest boss in the game. But basically the way it's set up is you go to a particular area. Once you enter this area, you can't leave the area, and you have 10 bosses that you face before fighting the final boss. Now, you do have a break in between. You can save in between, but of course you can't leave the area at all. So it's like, okay, you can. Each time you fight a boss, then it like drops a book basically that gives you some lore, like something written, from a first-person perspective of some character who is part of the game, like usually someone who is either mentioned previously or is directly like related to or connected to one of the characters you have. When you complete all of those bosses beforehand, which I will say the bosses are basically just harder versions of the bosses you already faced in the game. And really, it wasn't that hard to get through those. Those were not very difficult to get through. particularly if you were leveled well enough and if you had the secret additional classes that you could obtain, which were super helpful. But then when you go to the actual boss himself, he is extremely difficult. And perhaps if I had my characters like max leveled, it would be easier. But it's difficult to find a good spot to grind that out. And it just, like, it gets really tedious unless you just happen to be able to, extremely rare as it is, get the dance. If you use there, you can use the dance ability with your dancer and any other characters who are able to take on that class. And if you happen to get it to happen, which is like an extremely low percentage chance, they can dance to make it so you get 100 times the experience for that fight, which is a way that you can gain a bunch of levels all at once. But the problem is that it's exceedingly rare. And at least from my experience, although you can get it, you can only get it like once per character. So like the character can one time get that 100 times experience, and that's it. And probably about 50 to 60% of the time when you do a dance, you end up with status effects on you instead of a positive effect. So it just ends up being more of a pain, and it just like super tedious. It doesn't really, it's like, it's not enough of a guarantee. I mean, it's worth getting if you can get it. It's just a pain to get. So anyway, I've never, that's the one thing I was never able to do in the first game. As many times as I tried, I could never beat that boss. So that was annoying. But yeah. So yes, the stories did technically connect. It just was not explained in the way that it should have been. But everything I've heard about 2 is that they do a really good job connecting all the stories, and that they basically fixed everything that was wrong with the first game, which is great.
That's good. Because that's actually partially the reason why I stopped playing the first one, because, I mean, it might also have been me because I kept trying to find all the characters rather than progress through a particular storyline, but I just felt that every time I started a character story, I completely forgot what I was even doing before with another character, and it just felt so disconnected that I felt like, what's the point here? Like, especially since the characters, except for maybe a couple of times, they don't even have dialogue with each other. It just felt, the story felt broken to me just because there was no cohesion going on.
Right. I mean, there's ways, like, if you have them together in a tavern, and I can't remember exactly what you have to do, it's not complicated, but like you can have the characters technically interact. It's just that it's not like in progression of the story. It's a completely separate thing, and it, like you said, it was very disconnected. It was the biggest problem with that game, without question. So, but yeah. I'm looking forward to more of this game. It's just right now I'm trying to decide if I actually want to like really dive in, because I know it's probably going to be another 100-hour RPG, and I still have Persona 3 Reload that I haven't finished yet, and I do want to jump back into that, but I'm torn on it. And of course, I do, want to continue playing Horizon and everything. It's just, I got annoyed with it the other day. And, still, little by little, progressing through the messenger. I don't know exactly how far I am into it. I mean, I'm guessing it's about 50%, but I'm not entirely sure. I have, like, maybe 7 hours in that game altogether. Oh, speaking of Tales of Kenzera, I think the total amount of game time I had, like, I had 17 hours, but that was including the replaying the beginning of the game because of doing that for the recording. So it was probably around 15 hours it took me to 100% it, and that's with a lot of deaths from less from combat, more from the jumping puzzles. There were definitely some that were really frustrating, as tends to be the case with jumping puzzles. But the thing for me is that I would rather do a jumping puzzle over a combat challenge, because the jumping puzzle, it's basically just learning the timing more than anything else. getting the timing down, figuring out, and that's not to say that you won't still screw up sometimes, because sometimes you'll just make really stupid mistakes that it's like, I should not have made that mistake. I've gone through this 100 times on all these attempts, and I've never made this mistake, but this one time, I just jumped a little bit short, or I didn't land on the right platform, or, what have you. But either way, I still prefer platforming challenges, which is why in Guacamelee, I've gone through that several times, and I'm always happy to do those platforming challenges, but I'm never happy to do the combat challenges because I suck at them. Anyway, anything else before we start talking the news?
No, sir.
All right, so getting into the news, we're going to start off by talking about these details regarding the new Nintendo Switch and some new details that have surfaced. So, let me just go ahead and read. This is from Insider Gaming. Several new Nintendo Switch details have leaked online, which reveal some new features coming to the console. According to the Spanish website Vandal, which has reportedly received information from the console manufacturers, the Switch 2 will have Joy-Cons similar to the original Switch. However, instead of using the rail system that has been used by the Switch, it will have magnetic strips in some way or another. Now, I'm guessing that Nintendo has, in some way, shape, or form, set it up to where this is not going to be like really flimsy magnetic strips to where the Joy-Cons will just come off, super easily. But that it's designed better than that. You would hope. I believe actually, like someone was saying that there's that they had tried magnets with the original Switch, and at the time they would just come off way too easily, so they ended up going with the rails instead. But anyway, going back to the article here, they did say that because of the fact that this will be different than the original Joy-Cons will not be compatible with this new Switch, at least in terms of being able to actually attach to it. They didn't say whether or not they'd be able to use it, like if you're doing the dog face controller, or if you're just doing the Joy-Cons on their own. My guess is that could still work, but the Pro Controller is supposed to work with this. The current Pro Controller. It's interesting. One of the things that was said is apparently the way that the manufacturers for these third-party accessories and all of that, Nintendo didn't actually let them look at the system. They just let them stick their hand in a box and feel around the system to get the rough idea of the measurements that they would need for creating these new accessories or whatever else. And I'm just thinking, what's in the box? What's in the box? But anyway, this same site has also said that it's the Switch 2 is supposed to be releasing spring of next year. Already been rumored previously, and the Brazilian journalist Pedro Henrique Lute-Lippe, who has successfully leaked Nintendo announcements in the past, says the reveal of the successor of the Switch 2 is scheduled for June of this year. I'm skeptical on that part, because it would be great if Nintendo did that, but I find that part hard to believe. However, all that being said, what are your thoughts on this?
It's definitely interesting, and I agree with you about about having the magnetic strips, because it's gonna have to be a really strong magnet to keep it out, because I feel like it could be very easy to just have it to pull it off, and especially if you're playing it in handheld mode. Like if you say move your Joy-Cons the wrong way, your Switch will just fall straight out of your hands, which would not be fun. If they have some sort of locking mechanism, sort of like how with the current Switch has the lock for the rail, if they do it something like that, that could work. But again, I think you would definitely want to have something locking just to keep your Switch connected to your Joy-Cons. I also agree with you that theoretically, even though it won't work using it in tablet form and handheld mode, using the Joy-Cons, old Joy-Cons should work. You know, if you're just using it, just like you said, in like in the Joy-Con grip,
Yeah,
similar to the Pro controller. So I think that shouldn't be a problem there. I maybe it's just because I haven't been as into the Nintendo news as I used to be, whereas I was just like scraping the internet for every shred of rumor I could grasp onto. But I almost feel like, I don't know, I feel like maybe an announcement could be possible for June. I mean, I'm not saying that it will happen, but I feel like there at least is a possibility, because we did mention a couple times before. I mean, granted, these were other rumors, and not saying that those were true, but that there was some sort of announcement that could be coming up. I can't remember when we even said it was going to be. Or granted, I'm probably thinking about another rumor for possibly either Sony or Microsoft, so I could be thinking about that. But I don't know. I feel like it's definitely a possibility, because that's roughly around the time when they would have their own sort of Treehouse presentation or Direct in general. I mean, especially since, you know, they stopped going to E3 and that's not even around anymore. So I feel like that's roughly around the time when they would have an announcement. So they might do it, but as we mentioned before, if they went to do something like they did with the first Switch and announce it around the same time frame with like November, that would be something good to, you know, something fun for people who were excited when that was announced initially. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens there. But this is definitely interesting, and we'll see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my thing is that I feel like anytime we expect Nintendo to do something, to do like a big reveal early in the year, they don't do it. And so that's why I'm so skeptical. And of course, with the original Switch, they revealed it in October.
Oh, that's
and I don't remember what day it was, but the funny thing is that, like, I feel like, at least for me, it completely made me forget about, like, at the time, the upcoming presidential election, which, of course, you know, that's also happening this year, that we have our next presidential election. And obviously, we're not going to get into any of that, but, you know, get our minds off of that for a little bit. Do it right in October. That's the real October surprise, is they're going to reveal the Switch 2. But no, anyway, like, I hope Nintendo reveals it in June. I would be ecstatic, because I'm looking forward to seeing what they have. I mean, I'm still, more likely than not, I'm still going to wait for an OLED, because I just don't want to buy more than one. But I'm also thinking that whenever I do get the Switch 2, I'll probably give my wife the OLED, because I know she would enjoy the regular Switch OLED, you know, for like Animal Crossing and stuff. Because basically when Animal Crossing came out, we got a second Switch, which was the V2. I took that one because of the fact that I use the Switch a lot more than she does, and so she got my original Switch. And she still doesn't play nearly as much as I do, even though she, you know, has played easily 200-300 hours on Animal Crossing, and I don't know how many hours on Stardew Valley. Plus, you know, like Lego City Undercover and some other stuff. But what I'm thinking, though, is that whenever Nintendo does the Switch 2, particularly if there's an OLED or whenever the OLED comes out, I would give my wife the base Switch OLED, and then I would give my oldest son the original Switch, because I would love to give him a Switch. I've just been hesitant to do it, mostly because of the fact that even though he takes good care of his 2DS, I want him to be able to play more games on his 2DS before he goes all the way to the next level of the Switch, because that's a massive jump. and I want him to be able to appreciate more of the stuff in there. Like, I'm not gonna do my original plan and try to get him to play like all the old consoles before he's allowed to play the new stuff. Because like I basically tried doing it with getting him to play NES and Game Boy and stuff, and I mean at those times when I tried that, he was just too young. But then I finally just decided, okay, I'm gonna get all the boys. I'm gonna get both of the boys a 2DS at the same time. My oldest took to it pretty quickly. I mean, the first game I got them was Yoshi's Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World, which is a fantastic port to the 3DS, by the way. I don't know if it's 60 frames per second, but it is just a really fantastic game. It's so good. And it does use the 3D effect on the 3DS. But anyway, he took to that and got through the game pretty quickly, and then my middle son was able to eventually get into it and then go through it and beat it and everything. But I just kind of, I guess the main thing is I don't want to overwhelm, because there's so much as it is. Like, I think about the difference in the amount of games they have access to at their age compared to what I had access to when I was their age. Of course, back then I didn't have any consoles because my dad didn't let me get a console until I was 12, and then I convinced him, as like, okay, I can use my birthday money and buy it myself. And then from there on, I was able to, get my own games and all of that. But yeah, it's just like they have so many games available to them, just the sheer number of games that have actually released compared to how many had released when I was a kid. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And so I don't want to overwhelm too much, and I want them to be able to appreciate the library on the 3DS and 2DS, because there really is a fantastic library there, and there's so many games. I mean, really, I've only given them games that I actually have purchased. Like I've either done backups from my cartridge to their system, or I've downloaded the game after I purchased it on my 3DS because I wasn't about to buy a game 2-3 times. It's like, no, Nintendo, I'm not doing that anymore. No, thank you. I already spent a boatload of money when your eShop was closing. I paid for these games. You're taking them away. I'm giving them to my kids. I'm making it possible for them to play these games. So there. And you made it impossible for me to give you more money anyway. Anyway. Okay, going back to the topic, the idea of magnetic Joy-Cons, I need to see what they're doing with it. I want to know how this is going to look. Is it going to be like just basically a different version of the existing Joy-Cons that basically just removes the need for like that release button that you have on the back right now? Like, they'll still maybe use rails to help keep them in, but the magnetic aspect will make it so that it holds in place, and it's also easy to take out without having to press a button to pull them out, and it being a little awkward. But I don't know. It sounds like they're still sticking with the Joy-Con model, though, of having the two controllers with the button-based D-pad instead of an actual D-pad, and it works okay. I mean, I've used it in various 2D platformers, and it works just fine. I still don't prefer it, but it works. And I prefer D-pads in general for 2D platformers. In fact, I feel weird anytime I'm trying to play with a joystick. Samus Returns, Samus Returns was an example of that, but Metroid Dread, of course, you have to use the joystick. And it was, okay, that's good for aiming, but for platforming, I prefer using a D-pad. Always, always, always. I will say, though, and this is what I meant to say earlier, and I just got myself sidetracked. With Tales of Kenzera, at one point, when I was playing on my desktop, I plugged in my Switch Pro controller because I typically like the D-pad on there. It's not the best, but it's good enough, and it was really messing me up with some of the motions because there was some occasions where I was having to do something like at a downward angle, because one of the abilities lets you crash through certain walls, but you have to. But like the wall was down, so I had to do downward angle, and it wasn't doing the angle, and so then it was messing me up, and then I was dying while being chased by lava. So, but I was really surprised that the D-pad on the Xbox Series X controller, which is like that circular D-pad, but because of how clicky it is, it actually works really well. Like I was surprised. Like I had always avoided using it because it's the circular thing instead of like the really nice looking D-pad that you have on the Xbox One controller. I had avoided using it, but it's actually really good, and it's also good for like the in between motions as well. So shout out to that. That was surprising. But anyway, I think that's about all I have to say about that. I just hope that we do get to see the Switch 2 soon. I really want to know what they're doing with this.
Yeah.
It does seem like there's still further confirmation that it's going to be backwards compatible, which is great.
Yeah, definitely.
That's very important because that would be a big deal for me. If it wasn't backwards compatible, then I would lose a massive amount of interest in it. Because like I have a big Switch library. I've purchased it's probably the platform I purchased the most games for. And I want to have the ability to play my games that I haven't played yet. It's part of why I love PC gaming so much, is because I'm never limited on when I can play my games. But anyway. Any other thoughts on that?
Nope, I'm good here.
All right, so you want to talk about this whole Escape from Tarkov situation?
Sure thing. Alright, so Escape from Tarkov, it's a game that's technically I don't know what the status of this technically is, if it's still technically within a in development period. Actually, yeah, I think it's still in development. But essentially, it's a PC game. Honestly, I've heard bits about it here and there, but I didn't hear too much about it. But essentially, what's happening is that Escape from Tarkov, a new edition of the game, which was called Unheard Edition, is being released, and it's being announced as part of a patch, and it's promising players a new player versus environment mode, other bonuses, and also an offline mode. But the thing is, it's $250. It's $250, and and so if you already bought the most expensive edition of the game, the one before this which was the Edge of Darkness edition, which also promised you, by the way, all future DLC content as part of the season pass, you would have to buy the Unheard edition of the game, which again is $250 in addition to what you already spent there. And this did not please players. And however, the devs came back and tried to explain this, saying that it's not DLC, it's just additional content. So as if they're trying to differentiate what this DLC, what they said, it's not DLC, what this content is apart from the DLC that was promised in the in the Edge of Darkness edition. And they did come back and say, because there was a lot of backlash and a lot of protests from fans, they did say that they were going to give a small, what was the phrase here? I'm looking at this right now. Oh yeah, they said they were going to give PvE mode to owners of the Edge of Darkness edition when Tarkov enters beta and hits 1.0. But yeah, and then they had tried to apologize for that, for what had happened there. Before I say anything, did you want to share your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think it's funny that they say that this isn't DLC, but this is new content, which is downloadable, but it's not downloadable content. And um, the reality is that they could have very easily. I mean, I guess I understand that since the game technically hasn't gotten its 1.0 yet, they could technically have just released Escape from Tarkov 2. And I mean, I guess because it wasn't in 1.0 yet, they couldn't do 2. But the way that would be like the one way that they could get people to not have the backlash. However, the reality is that, yeah, I mean, people already paid for the game. They were promised that all future DLC would be included as for what they, paid for. And the fact is that these things that they added are huge, because previously the game was only PvP. If you died, you lose all your loot. And you just have to start over again. All of that. Now they're adding a PvE mode that can be done offline, that doesn't require going against other players, so you could just deal with more predictable AI instead of whatever, erratic behavior, that you would have from playing against actual human players. And furthermore, you can maintain all of your progression in the offline stuff to use in the online. Whereas in the existing modes, you don't have the option to do that. But they're locking it behind the paywall. Now, yes, they're saying with their apology after multiple days of backlash that they're actually going to give the people who paid for the previous edition early access to that mode. But it's not entirely, I guess what I'm not entirely clear on is whether they, let's see here. Just right here. I guess it's still not entirely clear whether or not they are actually going to let those players who have previously paid for the stuff actually still be able to keep the full PvE, new PvE mode and everything, or if it's just like, okay, we're going to give you early access and then we're going to take it away unless you pay for it. Because that's just scummy. I mean, considering what they said when they released it in the first place, and the fact that they're trying to, that they haven't even released the full game yet, and then they're doing a separate edition that's a whole $250 more just to be able to get these, honestly, essential modes. That there's absolutely no good reason to keep that away from the people who have been supporting this game all along, that paid for it a long time ago. Yeah, that I think that's about all I have to say on that. I'll just say that even if this was a game I was interested in, I could never see myself spending that kind of money to get these additional things. Like, anyone who would actually defend this decision of these developers, like, that's worse than defending Nintendo when Nintendo does their anti-consumer stuff, or PlayStation or whatever, because at least with Nintendo and PlayStation, they're not charging you $250 to access modes that you were supposed to get in the first place. Anyway, all right, that's all I got to say.
Yeah, you pretty much just covered a lot of what I was thinking. It definitely really sucks, and I just to make sure, because I wanted to, before I say anything out of place, and also just to clarify, or at least understand how much it is, the Edge of Darkness edition, which again was what was promised to provide all future content and DLC. The price for that, based on what I see here on GameSpot, is $140. They spent $140 initially, and you're telling, and the devs told them, they had the audacity to say, you spent $140. Spend $250 more if you want to play this special mode. So that's going to be $390 just to get what's considered the full game.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like, I mean, to be honest, I definitely understand. Granted, I think spending $140 just to get a game and a season pass is expensive enough as it is.
Right.
Considering the fact that, typically for some other games I've seen before, you're probably going to spend maybe $90 to get a game and season pass.
Mm-hmm.
I'm granted not talking about like Star Wars Outlaws, of course,
right.
but to spend $140 for what you think is going to be the full game, essentially, and then you have to spend another $250 is insane. And again, that's after. It's not even like you got a sort of discount where you bought this edition. Now you get a discount to the game to get the additional content. No, you have to spend an additional $250. And the fact that they thought it was fine, that fans would obviously want to eat this up, is insane. But I'm glad that they're getting a lot of backlash. I really wish I could remember, because I had seen someone somewhere in some videos say like, hey, instead of playing Escape from Tarkov, play this game instead. It's still in development, but it has pretty much the same general idea of as far as gameplay goes. Play this instead. So like, yeah, I definitely would say that if you wanted to play Escape from Tarkov, but of course because of this you don't want to anymore, try to find a game that does provide that same experience. Because I'm pretty certain there should be something out there that would still scratch that itch for you. So yeah, definitely do not play this game, or do not buy this game. Like, skip it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't really have any other thoughts on that, so let's move in. I mean, since we're already in a controversy, we might as well move into the next controversy, and that is the fact that Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, which has been remade and is coming out next month for Nintendo Switch. This was originally a GameCube game, considered a classic by basically everyone who's played it, myself included. This remake, although it's definitely a significant visual upgrade over the original, is only going to be 30 frames per second instead of 60, which the original game was 60 on GameCube. So I have very mixed thoughts on all of this. Before I talk about where I come from on this matter and where my, I guess you could say, waffly, kind of trying to decide what I'm doing here. Before I get into that, I want to go ahead and hear what you have to say.
Okay, I am going to obviously be opposed to this. I'm going to be on the 60 FPS master race here for a second, but I feel like this game definitely should be targeting 60 FPS. I feel like it definitely should be hitting this frame rate, especially since the fact that the original one was at 60 FPS. And from what I've heard, I never played the original Thousand Year Door, but I am aware of the fact that there are certain things where you have like timing mechanics for stuff like that. So because of that, you definitely should be trying to aim for 60 FPS if you're trying to make sure that the players have the best ability to have a good response time. That definitely should be there. And even though this is an RPG, I just feel like that should have been a goal here. That should have been attainable. Now, looking at some of the comparisons I've seen between the original sort of graphics of the original game and this one, I do see that there is an upgrade there. I've even seen, like, especially with some lighting stuff I've seen on some cobblestone flooring. Like, I do see that there is a graphical overhaul. At the same time, though, I still feel like 60 FPS could have been attainable. I feel like that's something that could have been presence there. And I mean, it is a remaster, so as opposed to this being a full-on remake, but considering the fact that Metroid Prime got a well, again, it was remastered, not remade, but it had a complete graphical overhaul. Like if compared with the original game and this one, it was a huge improvement, and it still hit 60 FPS. And the fact that also it's an it's a FPS. There's a lot of action going on. The fact that it's doing all this stuff and it's hitting 60 FPS, while again having a graphical overhaul, while an RPG, which while there are some good improvements as far as the quality of the graphics, it's not something. It's not. I wouldn't necessarily say it's overall intensive per se. So I don't see why that couldn't have hit 60 FPS. I mean, it's definitely something that I would say is a big disappointment. I'm not saying that. I feel like this is something that could have been possible. Whether it's something that they had spent some more time, trying to optimize and see if they could get it to actually hit 60 FPS, or if they said, maybe if we scale a couple things back in the graphics department. I definitely feel like 60 FPS should have been attainable.
Yeah, and I think that's completely fair. So here's where I'm at with this. Before it was announced that it was going to be 30 FPS, before that was made clear, I had already pre-ordered it. Mostly because I love the original Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. I loved it a great deal. It was fantastic. I think that both that and the original Paper Mario are some of my favorite. They are my favorite Mario RPGs that they've made. Like, I loved both of those games a great deal. They're both really fun. They're really, really funny. The visuals have been great. The music is fantastic. It's just like all across the board. I absolutely loved Thousand Year Door, especially. The story, was I should say the story was weak on the first one. It was exceedingly basic. The story's not complex by any stretch on Thousand Year Door. It's still reasonably basic, but because it's so funny and it's so just well done across the board, it didn't really bother me. But of course, you don't play Mario games for a story anyway, so I'm struggling right now with whether or not I'm going to maintain my pre-order on this. The main thing for me is that I very much would like to have a physical copy of this game on a platform where I would actually play it. Because I had the GameCube version for many years. I played it on GameCube originally. But then I sold both of my GameCube versions when I was, of course, saving up, trying to get some extra money so I could buy the Steam Deck OLED. And I know that even if I hadn't sold them, I probably never would have pulled out my GameCube again to play the game. I mean, like, realistically, if I was going to do anything, it would be, I would just emulate the GameCube version, get some HD textures and stuff, and, do all that. But with this, I'm struggling with it because it is a game where I feel like, yes, the 60 frames per second obviously is always better. Always, always, always. The amount of things that require precise timing are very limited. It's basically for the jumps, when you're like jumping on Goombas and things like that, and jumping on enemies. Basically the basic kind of attacks that you do with different characters. I don't even know if the original Paper Mario, I don't know if that one was 60. I honestly don't remember. At the time that I played it, I definitely didn't care about that. I'll have to, I could, boot up my N64 and pull out that game, or play it on Switch Online and see how it runs there. But it's one of those things where I honestly don't know if it's something significant enough to where I'm like, okay, I don't want to support this game anymore. Because it's still Nintendo putting out what is a beloved game. I do wish it was 60, and I definitely respect that people say that they're not willing to support this, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just back and forth on it. I'm leaning more towards I'm just going to go ahead and get it, because 60 frames, yes, ideal 100%, but I'm not sure if choosing not to buy it because of this frame rate. First of all, I don't think that there's going to be much of anyone who makes that decision, which means Nintendo's not going to get the message. So the only thing it's doing is basically saying, I want to communicate this message to Nintendo, even though they're actually not going to listen to me. And so I'm just doing this for me, for my own pride, whatever. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what you're doing. I mean, you do you. But I am... I understand and I respect the perspective. I'm just not sure if it's a hill that I feel the need to die on. Like, I would like to have a physical copy of this game and on a platform where I would actually play it. And it's possible that what I would end up doing is just buying it on Switch and then emulating it to get the 60 frames, but more likely than not, I probably wouldn't even bother with that, because I don't feel like it's significant enough for this game. As much as I dislike it, I don't think that choosing not to buy it is going to make that significant of a difference, and I really think that the number of people that aren't going to buy it aren't going to change Nintendo's mind at all. It's just going to be a small minority. It's going to be like the people who complained about Pokemon and all of its issues with the most recent games, but then the game still sold exceedingly well, and Game Freak did not get the message. So that's basically where I stand with this. I'm probably still going to get it. The only thing I might consider changing is I might not pre-order it, and I might just wait for a sale. In fact, I'm actually leaning a little more towards that, but at the same time, I'm also like, well, even if I don't get it at launch, the reality is I'm still going to end up buying it. So, yeah, I could save myself a little bit of money. Probably wouldn't play it right away anyway. Or I can just get it and have it, and then when I'm ready to play it, then I'll have it. I don't know. Feel free to disagree with me. Feel free to argue with me. That's perfectly fine.
Like, the biggest thing I have is just the fact that it's a downgrade as far as, like, from what it was originally, because you would expect something to either maintain the same quality or get better. Mm-hmm. I just don't see why they had to do this. Like, again, if it was a matter of just needing more time, I wouldn't have a problem with that if they decided, like, let's wait a couple more months and then put out the game and it's full 60 FPS. Mm-hmm. Or if it's just a matter of, like, wanting to, or sacrificing the frame rate in order to maintain, or sacrifice the frame rate in order to get the highest fidelity graphics for it. Because, like, I feel like this is definitely a game that should be able to hit it. Like, I'm not saying that it's like a game that's too demanding for the Switch. I don't think absolutely. It's definitely not a matter of, like, oh, the Switch is too weak to run this game. No, I don't think the Switch is too weak to run it. I just think it's the fact that they made sacrifices, or they just didn't have enough time. So if, like, they had the time to do it, I feel like it definitely could have done that, and I feel like that's something they should have done. But one thing I will add, though, is hopefully if the rumors of what we talked about before are true, then maybe on the Switch too, because it's supposed to improve the performance, then, then it'll be 60 FPS on Switch too. Yeah,
that's true. And that's a good point as well. Yeah, I mean, like, I would definitely say I don't think that they're probably the only conceivable reason I could think of why this game could not maintain 60, because I don't believe for a second that it couldn't hit 60, and it probably could even maintain it for most of the time. My guess is that it's probably just that it couldn't there were just enough spots where it dropped, where they decided we'll have a consistent 30. I mean, we'll have a locked 30 instead of having 60 like 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time it drops into the 40s or whatever. But my guess is probably, if anything was making it more difficult, it's just the amount of extra stuff they did with lighting and shadows compared to the original game, because the original game didn't have much of anything when it came to shadows, and this one looks like it's pretty significant in terms of the amount of shadows it has compared with the original game. And it really does look a lot better. And the original game looked great. It had pretty much a timeless art style, and if this game was exactly the same in terms of appearance, or it was basically looked the same as it did on the GameCube, but with HD resolution, then I would absolutely be all on the "this is not acceptable" train. I think it's also because I'm more forgiving with something like this, where there are significant upgrades, and because it is a turn-based game that, while yes, it has some timing things, there are ways to work those out with 30 FPS. It's different. It's not quite as bad as like making Metroid Prime 30 FPS would have been disastrous. That would have hurt the game significantly, because that's a lot, and that's very fast paced by comparison, and it just makes a significant difference. But as much as I want 60, I can accept 30 for this particular game, and for games like that. Like I was definitely not happy with the 30 FPS on the Metal Gear Solid games for the Switch, because there was no excuse for that. Especially on the original one. The original one had absolutely no excuse to be 30 FPS, and yet it's 30 FPS on every platform, which is stupid. And then 2 and 3, 60 FPS on 360 and PS3, and are 30 FPS on the Switch, which is unacceptable. Because it's not anything significant. Like, this at least, okay, the game is dramatically upgraded in terms of visuals. It really is a much better looking, much more impressive in terms of the shadows, the colors, the textures, the lighting, all of it. It looks so much better than the original. So I'm more willing to forgive it, and also because of the fact that it's handheld mode, where it because in handheld mode it would probably be where it struggles the most. And it could even just be that it's because of the downgrade in handheld mode that they had to have it at 30. It still doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you consider Metroid Prime Remastered, but I don't know. Either way, I think that it's perfectly reasonable to say this is not acceptable and all of that. I'm just I'm at the point where I've stopped caring as much whether or not other people agree with me on things. And I think that you just got to stand by what you believe. And what I believe is, as much as I want it to be 60, this isn't a game where it matters to me that much. And it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. Anyway, I'm just babbling about that. So that's basically where I stand on it. You have any more thoughts? Anything else you want to add to that?
No, sir.
Okay, so the next topic on a positive when it comes to frame rate is that Starfield is getting some pretty significant updates from Microsoft. So specifically on the Xbox Series X, right? Well, I guess I should back up. They are doing a big update in May. Going to start making some quality of life improvements across the board to Starfield, specifically on Xbox Series X. Some things will be across X and S, but the frame rate is one of the big things that they're doing specifically on the X. What they're going to do is they're going to make it possible to have a target of 60 frames per second. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to maintain that all the time, but the fact that they're bringing that at all to Starfield is significant, because the reality is that most of the game, it's not as hard to get that higher frame rate. It's basically just like when you're in the cities that it tends to be a bit more challenging because there's just so much going on, and the environments are much more detailed. Plus, of course, you're dealing with a creation engine, which has all of its own issues. But then they'll also have an option where you can have that balance in between, where it's a 40 frames per second mode for it. So you get the balance in between the high frame rate, having the 60 frames per second, which I'm really glad they're adding for Xbox players, and being able to have, the higher fidelity, being a better looking game. I'm going to be really curious to see what this looks like in terms of what Digital Foundry has to say with their analysis. But this is just one of the features that they're adding. The other thing they're doing, they're adding a whole host of different options in terms of how you can adjust things for the difficulty. You can... I'm not sure if you can completely eliminate or if it's just you can modify the amount, but you can adjust the carry limits significantly. You can change the difficulty of combat, both in on planets, when you're doing gunplay and all that, and when you're doing space combat, which, for the space combat, I definitely could see a lot of people wanting to tone it down, because the space combat is not very good. Or, well, I shouldn't say that it's not very good. It's a lot more difficult. Whereas the on-foot combat is too easy for the most part. The fact that I had multiple situations where I was facing enemies who were 20, 30 levels higher than me, and I had no problems taking them out. Or, at least if I was patient enough, it wasn't too hard to take them out. So you can increase the difficulty. They're adding additional stuff with New Game Plus, including being able to change your appearance, and respec your character with all of your existing points and things like that. It sounds like. Additionally, there's also going to be... I'm trying to remember what the other features were that they were adding. Oh, they're adding maps. Detailed maps to the cities and everything else. That is coming with the May update, which is fantastic, because that's something that should have existed in the first place. And it definitely, and when you bring up your, I can't remember what the term is for it, but basically it's like when you bring up your HUD that displays icons on your map and everything, you can actually have it to where it displays the icons for every, thing that's in a city, businesses and all of that. Something else they've added is the ability to not have the camera auto zoom in when you're talking to people, so you can actually just have more of a third person camera, which is really nice, just because it feels a little less claustrophobic. But also just I like the way it makes the game feel a little more... It always felt weird zooming in on people's faces whenever you're talking to them, instead of just being able to have the camera, where you want it to be. But the big thing that they're working on, it's not going to be with the May update, but it's at least in process, apart from, the DLC, is they've shown that they are, in fact, working on their first land vehicle, which is huge, because that is one of my biggest complaints about the game, is traversal on big empty planets, because it's just very slow. It's like, okay, you have the carry limits, which are one problem. Thankfully, they're virtually eliminating that, which is fantastic. Or at least, making it possible to eliminate that. But then having a vehicle to help you be able to traverse the planets a lot more easily is also huge, and something that's super helpful. And I'm hoping that it's going to be something that they actually do sooner rather than later. However, I'm willing to wait as long as it takes, because I mean, the fact that they're working on it tells me that it's probably going to come sooner rather than later. Um, and however long it takes, it just means that I have more time to play other games before I dive fully back into Starfield and actually play the rest of the game and like really be able to fully enjoy it. Because the things that took me off it so much were the carry limits just got really annoying, and the traversal while dealing with the carry limits got really, really annoying. So, anyway, your thoughts?
I think that this is all a lot of great news, especially with the frame rates, or at least with the new frame rate targeting. Because, I mean, for people who would have preferred that and really would have enjoyed that, I think it's great that they have that. And a lot of the quality of life features, I think are great, and especially I thought the most interesting was the difficulty slider, just because, you know, increasing it or adjusting it was going to affect your XP. So if you wanted, so like there was going to be a greater risk, but there also would be greater reward in that aspect too. So I appreciate they also did that. Also, I think they mentioned also like new features for ship customization as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting there. I'm glad you even mentioned about you getting into that, because after watching the video, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if you're actually going to get back into the game now because of this. And also that I didn't even know that you didn't finish the game so far. So I'm hoping that you enjoy it, and, you know, that it even entices you to get into the new game plus, because you enjoy the new features here. So
Right.
I think this whole update, well, I guess updates, because the traversal one is going to come later, but I think this is going to be a huge win for not only people on Xbox but also in general, just because some of those features also coming to the PC version as well. But it's great to know that, you know, they're still taking the time to make improvements to the game, even though it's even after, you know, it's been, I don't remember when the game released, but it's some time has passed. So it's great to know that they're still putting some stuff in there. They're still trying to make improvements and make it an overall better game. But it's just great to hear, you know. So great stuff here.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the main thing is like I enjoy most of the gameplay of Starfield. Like, I like just going off in the different rabbit trails, you know, going off and doing whatever quest I feel like doing, and it's like, oh, another quest pops up, and I get sidetracked to do a different quest, and like I love that aspect of it. The thing that just annoyed me the most was I would always end up being overburdened, which would mean that I couldn't move as fast, and it's like movement's already really slow. Even without that, because you don't have a vehicle, you can't, you know, you don't have like any way to move faster other than walking and using your jetpack, you know, running a little bit until you run out of stamina. And because of the carry limits, you'd run out of stamina faster when you were carrying stuff, unless you happen to use an ability that makes it so that you have like your own personal oxygen bubble that makes it so that you don't run out of oxygen for a little bit while you're running, or, you know, you're not using up your oxygen because you have constant flow. But it just became really annoying dealing with that, especially when I'm like trying to explore a planet and there's so much distance between places. You can't fast travel if you're overburdened. And so like if you have enough, I mean, if you have some headroom, then you can still, I mean, any locations that you've already been to, you can fast travel. You bring up your HUD, you know, and then when you can look off in the distance, you'll see an icon for something, you can fast travel to it, which is great. But if you have too much on you, if you're carrying more than your weight limit, then you can't fast travel, and it's just super annoying dealing with that. And so the fact that they're adding these features is significant. Now I will say that, of course, the ability to at least reduce the amount of, or, you know, make it so that you can carry a lot more, or if not altogether eliminate the carry limits, that is definitely super helpful. And if that's all they were doing and they weren't going to do vehicles, I would probably be okay with that, because that would take away like the biggest complaint I have about the game. But the fact that they are doing these vehicles makes it so that when it gets to the point that the vehicle becomes available, that's when I'm going to be full back into the game and really wanting to spend a lot of time in there and just just go back in, because I mean I put over 80 hours into the game and I enjoyed a lot of it. It's just those two big issues were my things that just made it so difficult for me to enjoy it. I think I probably would increase enemy difficulty in regular combat, because enemies just were really, really easy to beat. Like, I never really felt super challenged except when I was way under leveled, and even then it was just basically like I just have to play it very carefully. It wasn't anything significant. So yeah, I'm excited about this, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what happens with all of that. But I'll be keeping my eyes peeled, and hopefully they'll be announcing that sooner rather than later. Hopefully at least by the time it's the 1-year anniversary, which is in September. So by then would be good. I think by then I should be at least far enough along in the games I've been playing to where I think I should have time for something like that. But like right now, of course, I mean, assuming I don't dive into Octopath Traveler 2 right now. Big games. I mean, I got Horizon Forbidden West, The Messenger, which I don't think is super long, so it probably won't take me terribly long to finish it, other than the sheer number of times I die. And then Persona 3 Reload, which I'm maybe like a third of the way through, if that. I'm not sure. I can't remember. What else am I mean, I do eventually want to finish some of the Devil May Cry stuff, but I've already played 2 of them, so I'm at least happy with that part. Death Stranding. That's a big one that I want to keep playing through to the end. But yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of various games, and of course, then next month, of course, we have Ghost of Tsushima coming out. So that one may or may not be something that I focus heavily on, depending on where I am with Horizon, because I think I want to try to finish Horizon before I really play Ghost, because I don't want to, because I've already beaten Ghost before and I haven't beaten Horizon, and so it's like I want to actually finish Horizon before I jump full on into Ghost and get lost in that world, and then get away from Horizon and never come back to it. Then there's Dying Light that I haven't played in a while, that I was enjoying, and yeah, it's just that there's too many games. Always. All
Just
right.
proving your point earlier about what you were saying about, the time when you were younger as opposed to now, like how many games are out and available.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Without question. All right. Any other thoughts on that topic?
No, sir.
All right. So let's move on into some other positive news here. So we had previously talked about how Hi-Fi Rush was supposed to be coming to Switch. But then when Microsoft announced the games that were coming to Switch and to PlayStation 5, Hi-Fi Rush was completely absent. They didn't mention it at all as coming to Switch, but it's recently been rated with a PEGI rating. It said that the release date was supposed to be April 30th, which is already passed at this point. So my guess is it's more than just that the rating has, or that it's just the rating has been renewed. So as for when exactly that's coming, we don't know. Don't even know for sure if it's still actually for the Switch itself or the Switch 2. I mean, I'm guessing that because the rating is for the Switch, that it's still supposed to be coming to Switch. I'm wondering if I don't know. I could see it very easily being something that if it was going to come to the base Switch, it would be revealed at whatever the next Nintendo Direct is. If they did something like reveal the new Switch at the next Nintendo Direct, like if they did the June reveal, they could very easily reveal Hi-Fi Rush at that time and say this is coming both to Switch 2 and the original Switch. Now, I have a feeling that unless they do some significant visual compromises, that if it's coming to the base Switch, it's only going to be 30 frames per second, which I think could really hurt the game. But it's also possible that maybe the developers are good enough to where they could make this thing run at 60, and yeah, there'd definitely be some significant visual compromises, but they could probably still make it work. It's just more work, and you have to have a developer that's really good, or a port studio that's really good, something like a Panic Button, or, what have you. I'm sure that Panic Button would have an easier time making this run at 60 than getting Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal running at 60, because they couldn't. But yeah, your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely a bit of a surprise to see it come back again, especially with the actual original release date that was going to come for it. I partially feel that if it is announced alongside a Switch 2, I almost feel like they wouldn't want to wait, just because this is a game that that's perfect for the Switch just because of the art style, and which I think that if they did have to try to make some sort of compromises to get to 60, I don't feel like it would be too damaging just because of the cel-shaded art style. Like,
right,
that really helps there, because that's the sort of thing that really, in general, helps the game sort of be timeless, because it's not aiming for realism, so it's not going to age poorly over time. So I think as far as getting to port and have to make some sort of visual sacrifices here and there, sure, it won't be the same as the Xbox or PS5 version, but still something that would still look pretty decent, I would say. So I do feel like it's a game that might just be, whenever it's announced, it'll probably just be shadow drops right on the spot, like saying like, hey, here's the game, and it's now available on the Nintendo eShop online, or something, or something like that. I don't think they would wait for a Switch 2 to announce. They could say like it's now available for the Switch 2, and it's also going to come. It's available for the Switch, and it's going to come to the Switch 2. But I feel like they won't want to wait to put it on there, just because this is a game that is good enough to just like release right on the spot, or at least as soon as possible, even if it's something like, say, it's coming next month or something like that. So I don't think they're necessarily going to wait too long to release it. But yeah, considering the fact that this is a PEGI rating, and that's pretty much just the European version of the ESRB, I feel pretty confident this is, at this point, just a matter of time of it coming. Just, we don't know when it's coming, but it's gonna be on its way.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so any final thoughts on that before we move into our last topic for the night?
I'm good.
All right, so Microsoft just put out a survey to Xbox users asking which gaming handhelds you're currently using, and if you think you'll buy another one within the next 5 years. Potentially hinting at the oft-rumored Xbox handheld. Thoughts?
Yeah, this this definitely, I really feel like this, like, the Xbox handheld is going to be a thing at this point, just because the fact that, sure, Phil mentioned before, like, saying like, oh, I like playing on these handhelds, but I really wish there was something better out there, something that would be better for people who want to go back and forth between the Xbox ecosystem. The fact that they're now putting out an actual survey for a handheld, I really definitely, even, and also before that, there was also the rumor of the next Xbox being a console, but also in addition a handheld. To now having the survey, I really feel confident that Microsoft is pretty much gearing up toward making their own Xbox handheld. And considering the fact that the current PC handhelds have been a success. I think even though they're PCs, I feel like after seeing what is out there and what's capable, that Xbox gamers might feel inclined to say, hey, I would actually like to play my Xbox games with me on the go. I feel like that because of that, there is now a bit of a demand for that sort of market. So I think it's very likely. We probably won't hear anything official for at least maybe until the earliest would be the end of this year, saying like we have whatever the name of the Xbox handheld's gonna be, and then it's coming out next year in 2025, like next fall, for example. I mean, I feel like realistically though, whenever it is revealed, I mean, of course, this is also speculation, it's not official, but if something is announced officially that this is our new handheld, I think it actually would be sometime maybe around next year, just because, I mean, if they're, or granted, yeah, earliest would be like winter of next year, so like maybe around February or something like that, just because of the fact that if they're just gauging interest now, and unless they're of course gauging as far as like how many units to produce, if they haven't done anything so far concrete as far as schematics, you know, R&D and stuff like that, then it's going to take a while for them to actually get to the point where they actually have an actual product. But if they're just gauging about, you know, how much, you know, how many units to manufacture, then of course we'll probably hear something sooner than that. But I definitely like this is something that is going to be a thing. But something I also wondered is if Microsoft puts something out, will Sony follow suit? Just because of the fact that essentially at that point, every platform would have a handheld except for Sony. I mean,
yeah,
of course there's the there's the PS5 Portal, but I mean that really can't count because
right.
You know, it's not this gonna be the same thing. But I feel like Sony probably would feel like, you know, we kind of have to get back into the market, because I mean Nintendo's always had something, but Nintendo has something, Microsoft has something, PC has something, we don't have anything. So I feel like maybe that would really push them to make another handheld again, another dedicated handheld, I should say.
Right.
But I definitely do feel like an Xbox handheld is in the cards. And I'm interested in seeing what that looks like, what that exactly would mean, because I mean, would that just be a pure sort of like locked hardware, like just sort of like essentially a portable Xbox console, or would it be something that might be a little bit more open, but maybe with like sort of like, say, not necessarily like the same, but a Lenovo Legion Go or an Asus Ally, something like that, where it's not necessarily, it might not necessarily be completely open, because, you know, Microsoft would probably have like sort of lawsuits because of, hey, now you got access to Sony games. But I'm just really interested in knowing like what it's going to look like. So I do want to hear what the results are going to be there. So I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that more likely than not, what it would end up being is it would essentially be a handheld PC. Xbox branding, you know, would look very much like it's Xbox, but it would just have the Xbox operating system. And so it would, and then it would undoubtedly get hacked in no time, and then someone would be loading Windows onto it and then playing PlayStation games on an Xbox handheld, which, you know, there would certainly be some salt. I don't think there would be as much as if, you know, like Steam or whatever came to Xbox and then people had access to PlayStation games. But yeah, I think that it's inevitable that it's going to happen. I think that they're going to be making a handheld. I'm curious about whether or not it would actually push Sony. I mean, like, it should, and it would be smart for Sony to do it, but the problem is that Sony is so bad about supporting these devices. And with the way that they've been so focused on graphics and realism over everything else, I think that they would have a hard time designing games that would run well enough to where it would actually work. And so I just feel like it's going to end up being, if Sony were to follow suit, they would have a more difficult time than Xbox, because Xbox has a lot more games that have art styles that can work, that aren't like hyper realistic, that would be easier to scale down to a weaker handheld device. Whereas I feel like Sony doesn't really have that anymore, because they got rid of Japan Studio, and apart from like third-party games, they just don't really seem to have a whole lot of examples of their own first-party games that would actually be easily scalable. That's not to say that it couldn't happen, because of course, you have the Steam Deck that technically can run games like Horizon Forbidden West, runs Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart reasonably decently. I mean, 30 frames per second isn't ideal, but it's also on a handheld device compared with the massive PlayStation 5. So there's all that. One thing I will say, assuming Xbox actually does this, I think it will easily outsell all the existing handheld PCs, just because of the Xbox branding. I think that Xbox branding, Xbox operating system, it's going to outsell the Steam Deck, it's going to outsell the Lenovo Legion Go, the Asus ROG Ally. I think that it very easily will do that. It's not going to do Switch numbers. Not a chance. But, yeah. I mean, of course, obviously, we have all the people in the comments, well, I should say, the handful of people, primarily just that one person that I called my biggest fan, who, would talk about the fact that the Switch sells so much better than this. I think that, obviously, the Switch and these PC handhelds, they don't really compete with each other because they're just two completely different platforms for two different audiences. But I think that the Xbox and the Switch would be competitors in a sense. They still wouldn't quite be direct competitors in the same way. It would be an interesting thing, because I don't think it would quite be a competitor either with the handheld PCs. The Xbox wouldn't be. But at the same time, I also don't think it's really a competitor with the Switch, because they're just different markets even so. Because, the Switch is so focused, it's like you got first-party Nintendo games, you got a lot more just the types of games that you get on Switch. I mean, I think Xbox and Nintendo are closer than like Nintendo and PlayStation, but Xbox is also closer to PlayStation than they are to Nintendo. And so it's such a weird thing. I don't know. I do maintain, I do believe it will sell better than Steam Deck and other handheld PCs. But I don't think it's going to sell as well as the Switch.
I have a couple questions that just popped into my head just now. So, first one, do you think that an Xbox handheld would have any exclusives like solely for that handheld, or do you think that Microsoft would think having exclusives for it, or at least solely for the handheld, would be detrimental, just because there's less of a reach in that aspect?
I don't think they would be doing any exclusives for the handheld itself. I think that everything that's on Xbox, assuming this comes with the next generation of Xbox, which I think is more likely. So I think 2026 is probably the earliest we would actually see the real thing. I think that it's going to be the same games, but they're going to be the kind of games that are scalable enough to where they can actually make them work on something as weak as the handheld device. That's my opinion anyway.
Okay, so I guess because of that, if in a hypothetical situation it did have exclusives and it had an OLED screen, would you get it?
No. Because the thing is that regardless of whether it had exclusives or not, the main thing is that Well, first of all, I don't believe for a second they're gonna do that exclusive thing, because they right now all their Xbox games also come to PC. So that in and of itself, I mean, yes, theoretically they could have exclusives, but it would also have to be games that I want enough to make that purchase, and I don't see that happening. Now, I do hope that they do an OLED screen. I think that would be great. I don't think they will. I think they're just going to go the same route that most handhelds do, which is stick with the LCD. But also just like I don't see the point, because there haven't been any Xbox games so far that have been unable to run on like my Steam Deck. Now, yes, Starfield doesn't run great on the Steam Deck. It's definitely far less than ideal, but I technically can still play it there. And you know, with the I mean, I wouldn't play it there most of the time. I'd still play it on my desktop most of the time, but I just can't see any good reason. Like every other Xbox game I've put on my Steam Deck runs great. I think the worst examples of games in terms of frame rate would be, I mean, with the exception of Starfield, because obviously that doesn't run the best. Recore and Sunset Overdrive, but those still can do basically a locked 40 FPS without any difficulties, and they look and run great. Of course, those games are, well, especially Sunset Overdrive, it's gorgeous on the OLED. So, but yeah, like I'm happy with those games already. The other thing is that I don't want to keep buying platforms for those platform-specific games. Like the Switch, yes, is because it's different. Nintendo stuff is different, and because their games don't come anywhere else. Now, of course, if they did start putting their games on PC, I would probably abandon Nintendo in a heartbeat. But, or at least abandon buying their platforms. But otherwise, I can't see myself actually doing that anymore. It's like that's the reason why I haven't bought a PS5 and am not planning to. Any other thoughts?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right, so I think we're all ready to close out for the evening. So, recommendations and dissuasions. Go ahead and start off.
All right. So my recommendation is, if you're a person out there who likes or is interested in getting into repairing your own products, primarily like sort of like with computers and stuff like that, and you're interested in just like learning some more stuff, a channel called Louis Rossmann. He has videos, he has content out there. He teaches about like doing repairs for stuff, primarily with like MacBooks and stuff. He actually has full-on videos showing you how to repair stuff, so that way you don't actually have to go into a shop or somewhere, or send it to somewhere like to AppleCare or any other shop to have that product repaired. He provides you with the knowledge needed to actually get it done. So yeah, go check him out. Also, if you just really want to are interested about like right to repair, and having the ability to repair your own products instead of having to send it to a manufacturer, or just having to go to some authorized dealer or something like that, you can go check his channel out as well. Especially because apparently because of some stuff he's done, because he's trying to promote an app that sort of competes with YouTube. Apparently YouTube is possibly going to shut his channel down, so go check it out before that happens, if it actually does happen. So that's my recommendation there.
All right, good stuff. Well, my recommendation is Tales of Kenzera Zao. I'm recommending that again this week, especially because there has been so much of this rage bait stuff, and a lot of these channels that talk about like controversies related to, especially stuff with Sweet Baby and just the general like censorship and making female characters look less feminine and all that. It's like, I agree with some of the stuff that some of these channels discuss, but I feel like the backlash against this particular game is an overcorrection. And I don't think necessarily that these people are racists because they don't want to play a game with a black main character. I don't think that's really the case. I think the people who are accusing them of being racist are actually the racists in general. But I still think that they are overreacting, and they do that a lot, and it's because that is how they make money. And it's like, okay, you know, like I understand this is, you know, what gets you clicks, this is what gets you views, this is how you pay your bills, all that. But this game is good. It's very good. It's very worth your time. You know, where I would say something like Miles Morales definitely goes very heavy on the political messaging. This game has none of that. And it really is just a tale about a son grieving his father, and it really gets into how it is that you deal with that grief and learning to move into the point of accepting, you know, the realities of it all. And so I really think it's great, even if you're someone who has never lost a family member, who's never lost someone that you loved before, because I know people who have been in that position. You know, they've never lost anyone, and so that message isn't necessarily going to resonate with them. If you like Metroidvanias, particularly if you like Ori and the Blind Forest or Ori and the Will of the Wisps, this game is very reminiscent of that, and it's just a really good game. And it's not super long. It's pretty easy to get all the achievements or all the trophies depending on what you're playing. I think it's just a great game, and I think it's well worth playing. Plus, it's cheap. $20 for the game. You can, I mean, depending on the number of deaths you have, you know, even with my probably hundreds and hundreds of deaths that I have, I, you know, completed the game in 15 hours for the entire thing. So it's one of those rare games that actually is cheap and short instead of being $50-$60 and short. Yeah, so that's my recommendation. And your dissuasion?
My dissuasion is don't neglect to drink more water. As we get closer to the summer period and as it gets warmer, please drink more water, stay hydrated, you know, don't suffer from dehydration or potentially get heat stroke or something like that. Just drink more water, you know, stay hydrated, stay safe.
Always good, and always something I have to keep reminding myself to do. So, like, typically I'll drink 4 of these a day. That's at least the goal, which is, you know, about 160 ounces of water. So I drink a lot of water. But there are some days where, because I'm just, like, focused on whether I'm, you know, working on stuff or I'm playing games or, you know, what have you, and I don't really think about the fact that I should actually be drinking water, and so that I don't drink water. And I had to force myself sometimes to actually drink it because I don't think about it enough. But anyway, good recommendation, good dissuasion. And my dissuasion is don't jump on every bandwagon. So you're allowed to have your own opinion, and you're allowed to go with what you think about something. You know, there's nothing wrong with agreeing with people who, I mean, you know, having a similar view to the other people. Nothing wrong with that. You know, if you don't want to buy a game that has Sweet Baby involved because they're involved, no matter how minor the involvement, then by all means, you don't have to do that. No one's saying you do. But don't let yourself, I mean, like, if you're excited about a game, don't let the, you know, what your favorite rage bait YouTuber is saying about it, or, you know, whatever people who are virtue signaling about something, because they say don't play this game, don't purchase this, whatever. Don't let other people make your decisions for you. Make your decisions on your own. Don't jump on every bandwagon. Just go with your gut on things and just don't worry about what people think, because it doesn't really matter. Life is short. If you want to enjoy something, if you don't care that the game is 30 frames per second over 60, and you don't think the controversy is enough to keep you from buying a game, then ignore it. Just go buy the game you want to play and play the game you want to play. And don't worry about it. Just be aware sometimes there will be things that you've been warned about. It could be an issue, and if it ends up being an issue and it ends up bothering you, well, you just gotta deal with it. That's just what it comes down to. So, but yeah, don't jump on every bandwagon. Think for yourself. All right. So, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Xercon. That's IAMXERCON. So I am youtube.com/IamXercon. I didn't put anything new out this previous week just because I scrapped several ideas. I think for my next video, though, I will possibly be covering the incident with Louis Rossmann, but I actually have to watch his full video. I only saw that he posted something today and got only a general idea, so I might go into more depth about that on my channel later on, so we'll see.
Sounds good. All right, well, you can find me on YouTube at TheFrozenGamer87. Of course, weekly I put out the comparisons between two OLED devices. Typically, it's Steam Deck OLED versus the Switch OLED. The last one I put out, as I mentioned before, is Tales of Kenzera Zao, which was a great comparison. The next one that's going to be going up is either going to be doing a Vita versus Steam Deck comparison of Helldivers 1. That's assuming that I can actually find other people online to play the multiplayer with on the Vita. Because if I can't find that, then I can't do that comparison. If I can find that and I have time to record it this weekend, which I should have the time, it's just a matter of finding the people to play with, then I will be doing that one next. If I either don't end up having the time or can't find people to play with on Vita, then I will be doing Borderlands, the pre-sequel, because I already have the Switch half recorded, and so I just need to record the Steam Deck half. But lots of comparisons planned. It's just a matter of having the time to record the footage, and preferably having the time to record it when I'm not going to have to deal with a bunch of kid noise in the background, because it's a pain to remove it sometimes. So that's just the reality of being a parent. But then you can also find me on my cooking channel. It's called Not Authentic But Delicious. That's youtube.com/@NABDcooking. Also, that's that same handle on Twitter or X, whichever you want to call it. You can also find that one on Facebook. And the most recent recipe I put out is an old family recipe, an old family recipe from my wife's family that's been passed down over the past 3-4 generations. I guess it's 3 generations. Yeah, but anyway, great recipe. It sounds really, really weird. The name of it sounds weird, but it's so good, and it's one of my favorite meals that my wife makes. Definitely well worth making. I'm still not going to say the name of it, but it's the most recent recipe on my channel. So you'll see it, you'll think it's a weird name, and just trust me on it. Just watch the recipe and try it for yourself. It's not difficult to make, and it's really good. Next week, I'm probably going to be putting out my jerk chicken recipe, but I haven't fully decided if I'm doing that or if I'm going to do something else. I'm soon I'm going to be recording a recipe for doing smoked salmon, which would be specifically like salmon lox. And I don't know if you have any familiarity with that. It's basically like a cured cold smoked salmon. So it's got like more, almost like a raw texture to it, but it's not raw. And typically it's served on like an everything bagel with cream cheese, and sometimes people will put other stuff on it. I really like doing it with cream cheese, avocado, and spinach. It's super good though. But I'm probably going to record the first part of that tomorrow, and then because the curing part is like super fast and easy to get it started, and then Saturday, when I actually will have time to do the smoking, because it has to cure for a couple days in the fridge, then I will smoke that and finish up the recipe for that. But I don't think I'm gonna have enough time to get all of that completed, recorded, and edited before Monday, when the next recipe will go up. So most likely it's gonna be my jerk chicken recipe that goes next. Yeah, that's pretty much it for that. And of course, you can also find this podcast. We're on both Twitter and on Facebook. Facebook, I don't remember if we actually have a handle on there, but on Twitter, it's at the Orange Box Pod, because I couldn't fit Orange Box Podcast. So we have that as well. And I think that is about it. So, any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, listen to some video game music. Orange Box Podcast, out.